heading on out of the underground. Going on up to, well, meet Lily or meet Thomas. One of the two, maybe both. Who can say? But we're outdoors again. Oh, there's the sun coming up.
This is it. The place from my dream. I've walked this path 1,000 times in my mind. I know every inch of it. But this time, something is different. I'm getting close. I can feel it. I can feel it so clearly now. More pieces left on the floor. Drawn to light once more. I step outside. I shut the door. I go into that shining star. One more scar. Out of place and time, searching for ties that may yet bind. And so I step beyond the night to find You finally made it. Lillian. Been waiting for you, little sister. Lily, I didn't know. I couldn't remember. I'm so sorry. It's okay. It was better that way. At least you had a life. For a while. Lillian. That day when the fire broke out at our house, I made a deal. The part of my soul that was tormented was set loose. You mean the monster? But why? To save you. It helped us escape the flames, but in return, I had to set it free. Free to devour, to destroy, to kill. The Neva massacre. Yes. All those people died so that we could live. And because I lived, so did my demons. Father knew my powers were too dangerous. He left you at the hospital so you could have a normal life. And what about you? Did he try to... No. Maybe he should have. But he couldn't bring himself to do it. Instead,
He locked me away. But he only delayed the inevitable. Monster. It got out. And now you're here. You're the only one who can fix this. You. We both share our father's gifts, but also his fate. And the dream.
The dream? All I see is a girl. You. Shot dead. Here, on this pier. Hasn't it already happened?
No. It's not the past you see. The dream. It's what I want to happen.
What?
It all ends in me.
But... No! No!
You can't send a spirit away while the host is still alive. That's why you couldn't destroy the monster. That's why Sadness didn't want to go.
But... You're my sister.
That's why it has to be you. I'm not strong enough. It won't let me. Only you can end this. Only you can fix what our father could not.
Lillian, I can't. Please, don't make me do this.
It's the only way to destroy it. To prevent further bloodshed.
Lily? Oh!
Marianne? What's going on?
Skin suit. Now too small. Constricting. Outgrown. Don't lead her. Suit. Light. Almost gone. Not dark yet. But it's getting there.
There is another way.
Marianne. No.
What is she doing? It changes nothing. Nothing!
Like you said, I'm your only chance. Aren't I? You need a medium strong enough to sustain you. The others, they only lasted for so long before you broke them down.
Marianne, please. I don't want
Maybe
this.
it's not your choice. Maybe this is my story after all. No! Don't do this!
Please, sister. Set me free.
No! Stay back! Stay back!
It has to be you.
It never stopped.
Finish this.
Only you can end this.
You can't always save everyone. Butterfly.
It all starts with a dead girl.
Oh, it's over? Well, all right. Well, I mean, I guess I'll give some thoughts. Maybe we should listen to the credits music. Maybe it'll be a nice track. And we can think about the emotionally powerful scene that we just saw. I kind of expected there to be like another area, but no, I guess we just finished it right now. Okay. Talk to you after the credits.
Voices deep inside me keep calling, they're calling. Voices deep within me, they tease me. Why can't I break free? Voices all around me whisper to me, someone make them go away. Voices walk beside me, hide behind me. Please make them go away. Someday I'll find my own way. Won't look back on all this pain and sorrow. Some way there'll be a new day, and the road before me I will follow. Voices in my head echo all that's left unsaid from the dead. They said, keep ringing in my head, and these voices in my soul know that I'm not in control. Let me go, let go. No one ever has to know. Crying tears in isolation, the lost time, what was mine? Searching, shivering in the darkness of my mind. I'm so blind. Screaming breaks the silence. No reliance on my fading sanity. Savior, there's no savior to recuse me from my own humanity. My life best seen in hindsight. So much lost in moments lived unclearly. I pray there's something you'll say that will soothe this soul who needs so dearly. Voices in my heart tearing all my hope apart. Ease the pain, but it remains. I'm lost on where to start. 'Cause with everything I hear and with all these things I fear, what's the point? Time's out of joint, and everybody knows. Screaming breaks the silence. No reliance on my fading sanity. Savior, there's no savior to recuse me from my own humanity. And these voices in my heart tearing all my hope apart. Ease the pain, but it remains. I'm lost on where to start. And these voices in my soul know that I'm not in control.
Their biggest and most ambitious game. Well, they would like to hear our impression. I guess they are hearing. I think that they are hearing people's impressions of it. Oh, I can review it now. Okay, so the credits end with a link to review it now on Steam. Just, while it's fresh in your mind, maybe if you want to get your thoughts down in a Steam review, maybe later. Maybe later. I guess that would be Spirit Thomas, walking away from Spirit Neva, looking for real Thomas. We didn't find real Thomas. Well, I should say living Thomas. I mean, we were looking for him this whole game, but we never actually found him, did we? As far as we know, he's still alive. We don't think he's dead, right? But I guess Spirit Thomas is on his way to attempt to find him. He said he couldn't detect him. Well, okay. What do we think about The Medium? Well, I did see that some people said that they found the ending to the game tasteless. I haven't really read any opinions as to why that is, but I think I have a pretty good idea. I said earlier, I think, that I was thinking that someone creates a demon by committing heinous acts, but I think I was wrong about that. I think the idea is that a demon is created by someone when heinous acts are committed to you. So demons are created through trauma, and those demons will induce people to commit heinous acts towards other people in the future. So in the cases that we have seen, first there was Richard, who had a bad stepdad, and his childhood love was, I believe, killed by Nazis, was the idea of what was happening in that flashback. And because he went through this trauma and lived through it, that created a demon that would, later in life, cause him to rape a child. Then there was Henry, who, from his mindscape, it seemed like he had a bad dad as well. The father who spoke like this. Remember, Henry, to cut the meat just so. Where is that child? And the bad dad wasn't that big of a part of it, of the flashback, but it was implied, I think, that there was some child abuse happening there. And Henry, later on in life, would go on to get a job that allowed him to inflict horrible violence on people, that he could be justified as part of his job. As we saw his mission to get Thomas, I guess he burned a house down with children in it, believing that that was justified as part of his job. So I assume that he was induced to do this by his demon that was created because he was abused as a child. Then there is Lily, who got the biggest abuse of all, because she was the recipient of abuse from both Richard and Henry, as she was Richard's victim, and also was one of the kids in the house that Henry burned down. So Lily's getting it the worst of all, and because of that, her trauma generates the worst demon of all, the Maw. And even though Lily personally is not inflicting violence, Lily's demon, created by the trauma that she received, has been committing a whole load of violence. So, I get what they're doing here, is they're using the concept of the cycle of abuse, but making it supernatural with demons. I get that's the idea, but it's kind of a weird story where the idea is that if someone has been the victim of abuse earlier in life, that means that they are now dangerous people who are destined to abuse others in the future. I can only assume that that's the idea because no one in this game actually is able to surpass their abuse, but rather their entire lives apparently get shaped and defined by it. So I think that's I'm gonna guess that's probably the reason that people find this game distasteful, because that is that's kind of odd. It's kind of a weird idea. Like I get the idea of, hey, what if inner demons were actually real demons? But it is kind of weird to come up with a story where the abuse victims are the monsters, and I don't know. It's kind of I don't know. Lily. So the whole thing was that she was still alive, and because she was alive, the maw could not be sent away by Marianne as she had sent away the other demons. So she had to die so Marianne would then be able to send away the maw. Why didn't Lily just shoot herself? Am I missing the point there? Why didn't Lily want her sister to shoot her? She could have just done it herself if she wanted to, I suppose. But and that would have saved Marianne a lot of trouble, as she would have been able to just send away the maw. But details. That's probably not really the important thing here. What is the important thing? Well, the important thing is that we had a story about a woman who couldn't really remember her early childhood and discovers that, it was very bad. Bad things happened, and I have to do more bad things to fix those bad things. Still kind of weird that we didn't find Thomas, considering the whole premise of the game was to find Thomas, and we never actually ran into him. That seems odd, doesn't it? Also, that whole last section felt kind of odd. I felt pretty certain that there was going to be like one more area in the game, considering that like we had that previous area that ended with the big cutscene with Spirit Thomas. No, we just headed right into that final cutscene and the credits, and that was it. We finished it very quickly after that. Odd pacing in this game. I mean, what would I say about this game? It feels weird because it looks like the environmental art is very good, and everything else about it is not, kind of. Like, it looks good, and then it's like nothing else about it seems to be living up to that. Like, nothing else about it seems to be living up to, like, this scene that we have here. Scene that we're seeing up in front of us right now. So this is going to be kind of an odd question. Was this a horror game? It looks like a horror game, right? I know it sounds like an odd question, because what else would it be? But I feel like this really wasn't horror. And I felt that as we've been playing it, and I haven't really been able to describe why. But I think what I would say is that, well, horror games can come in all kinds of shapes and sizes. But one thing that I think probably defines what is at the core of horror is the attempt to build tension. Any horror game will try to build tension. Not all succeed. There's some real bad horror games that try to and fail miserably. But you can see that they're trying. I felt like in the medium, at no point were they actually trying to build tension. It felt more like this game was an urban exploration game. You're exploring some ruins, and hey, there's a supernatural version of it as well. I never felt like there was any point where they were trying to build up the feeling of tension or terror or anything like that. There was like one jump scare, and there's the bit where there's a couple bits you're being chased by the maw that are, a bit higher energy. But I never actually felt like any tension was being built at any point during this game. So I don't think it's really a horror game. It looks a lot like a horror game, but any elements that I would usually attribute to a horror game, I'm really not seeing here. It doesn't feel like anything. They clearly were going for making the most morose game they could. And it is morose, absolutely. And that's the only feeling I'm getting from it. I don't get anything else from this. Now, I probably should... Okay, so if there is zero tension in this, I probably should contrast that. What is a game that I think has a lot of tension, as an example to compare and contrast to? Well, you don't need a high budget to build tension in a game. You don't need a complex game. One horror game one's very low budget horror game that I can think of that does an excellent job of building tension with very little gameplay is Anatomy by Kitty Horror Show. Very low budget game, like it has PS1 level graphics. The gameplay is very simple. It's just walking around a house and finding audio cassettes and listening to them. In a way, so medium, very simple gameplay as well. Not much going on in the gameplay department. But Anatomy, it takes what little it has and does a great job of building up a feeling of tension and dread. I would point to that as a short, very low-budget game with very little gameplay that is able to do a great job of building up that sense of tension, in contrast to the Medium, which is a game where you are a person walking around and exploring an architecture, and there is just zero feeling of tension or dread at any point as you're doing it. I don't feel like this is a horror game. It only looks like a horror game. I've heard some people say that this game should be considered to be a walking simulator, even though it's in the third person and looks like it might be a survival horror game, which clearly it isn't. That it should be judged as a walking simulator and thus compared to other games in that genre. So I was thinking about that. If you do that, does the Medium look better? Is it then a better game if you take that comparison? I still think no. I still think it isn't. Because there are much more interesting games in that genre. I know walking simulator is not an official name of a genre, but you know what, when you say that phrase, you know what kind of games we're talking about. If I wanted to make a comparison to that genre, probably the best walking simulator I've played was What Remains of Edith Finch. That is also a game about a person exploring a house, an environment, and learning about the fates of what happened to some dead people. And if I'm comparing that game to the Medium, Edith Finch is far more interesting and engaging than this. That is not a flattering comparison for the Medium. I don't think you can say that this is a better game if you take it in that context. Think of it as a walking simulator, because there's much better that genre has to offer. I don't think this is something that redeems the Medium. Medium looks like it might be an imaginative game when you first see it, because you see like the Brzezinski style environments, you see the split screen, which, hey, I haven't seen a game do that before, but man, it just kind of is a whole lot of nothing, isn't it? It's just kind of nothing. I can see that people would be disappointed in the style of gameplay because, well, it kind of looks like a traditional... Like, some people say, hey, it looks like a traditional old horror game because look at the predetermined camera angles and the way you're moving around the environment and solving, like, little puzzles and such. And, man, it just really isn't like that at all, though. It just really isn't that kind of game. And I'm not holding that against it because it doesn't have to be that kind of game. I just don't think what it is, it's doing a good job of... I don't think it's doing a good job of being what it is. I feel like they kind of like took some things and just kind of assembled them without really knowing why. It's kind of a weird thing to say. I'm trying to think of to elucidate my words. Here's an example. You get those bolt cutters, right? bolt cutters are an item that's fairly common in like a survival horror game. You might use them to unlock locks. An example of that being the last few Resident Evil games, which featured the exact model of bolt cutters in every game. Think of something like Resident Evil 2, in which you get some bolt cutters, and then you can use that to go back. You could explore the environment, find some chained up doors, and then at some point you find the bolt cutters, and then you can use those bolt cutters to go back to those doors that you found and cut them open, so now you can go inside. In this game, there's a section where you find some chained up doors, and then you find the bolt cutters, and then you can unlock those doors. However, this is a very linear game, so then after that section, you continue to find some chained up doors that you would use the bolt cutters to open. Why would you even need to do that, though? You wouldn't have been able to get to that section in the first place if you never got the bolt cutters. Because of that, there's actually no reason for the bolt cutters to be used after that point, because you needed to get the bolt cutters to begin with to get further into the game, so why would you encounter chained up doors later? Because there's zero chance that you wouldn't have the bolt cutters by the time you get to those doors, because the game is so linear. It feels like the only reason that those doors exist is because they saw that in other games. You get what I mean by that? Like, this is nitpicking, I know, but I think it's kind of an example of how it feels like this was all kind of just put together without really knowing why. Why are they doing anything? It doesn't feel like there's a good reason. So I mentioned that I found the soundtrack to be underwhelming. The vocal tracks are all right. Those are pretty good. Mary Elizabeth McGlynn is a good singer, as always. But aside from the vocal tracks, I never really noticed when there was music playing, which made the whole thing just feel kind of dull and lifeless. Again, it's kind of weird saying that, considering how interesting some of the environmental art is. It kind of just speaks to the rest of it about how everything else about it just made everything feel so dull. It felt like the story just had a real lack of direction. From the beginning, how Marianne gets a phone call and decides to head off to Neva just based on that phone call and nothing else. And then she discovers, oh man, this place isn't just haunted. This is super haunted. And then she just stays there anyway. And why doesn't she leave? She just decides to stay there. There's nothing stopping her from leaving. And a big point of the game was trying to find Thomas. That was the initial goal, and we never found him. That's an odd decision. And then, of course, the weirdest decision was the main core of the story of trauma victims becoming dangerous people who will inflict trauma in the future because their trauma created a demon that is now in them. Like, if there was anyone here who actually surpassed their demon, it wouldn't have been much of a problem, I think, because then you would have an example of, oh, here's someone who was capable of doing it, but no one was capable of doing it. Like, everyone's life was shaped and defined by their trauma and their demon. So I kind of get what the issue is that some people have in that direction. I never like to really, after playing a game, I never really like to say, oh, this game did everything wrong, it didn't do anything right. But honestly, I'm kind of struggling here to think of things that it did right. Like, I can't say it did much. It didn't even do that much with the split screen idea. Like, there wasn't too much that was actually done with that. There were some parts in which, well, yeah, there was some, I mean, all that, I think in the end, all that really did was distract me from looking at one side or another. Like, my focus might be on one side of the screen, but maybe there was something of interest on the other side that would have been easily noticed if I was looking at the other side. Like, usually when you had a split screen, I was looking at the Dead World side. But sometimes there was something on the Living World side I needed to notice, and I just didn't see it because my eyes were on the Dead World. That was especially noticeable in that confrontation with the Maw, where I needed to juke him by running off to the side, then using the out-of-body experience, and then running to a button to electrocute him. That took me a bunch of times because I was looking at the dead side of the screen and there was something on the living side, a prompt that I needed to notice but just didn't see at first. I feel like, something I noticed where some people were saying that they liked the Thomas sections where you play as Spirit Thomas, and they would have preferred if more of the game was that. And I was thinking about that. Why is it that the Thomas sections seem more interesting than the Marianne sections? And I think the reason is that in the Marianne sections, she doesn't do anything. Like, she has come to this place after the fact, after everything has happened, and is trying to figure out what happened. When you're playing as Thomas, it is in the past, it is during a period where things are happening. Thomas is in a more interesting time period. He is actually doing something. He actually has some sort of agency in what's happening. Whereas with Marianne's role is just as basically a historian. That's her role here. She's exploring the place to discover what happened. But playing a version of this where you are actually on the scene when things are happening is just more interesting. Look, we've all played a lot of games about you enter a place, oh, something bad happened in this place, and now I am going to spend time exploring and finding logs and discovering hints and clues as to what happened. We've all played many games like that. And maybe it's a bit more interesting if you actually are playing during the point in time when things are happening, rather than after everything is done and happened. And because of that, I think Marianne does feel like an uninteresting protagonist, as she is only there to document and log the things that other people did. That's what I feel about that anyway. Performance is weird, right? Like, we've mentioned that like a lot of people have mentioned that performance is spotty. I'm playing on a 1070, which is not a cutting-edge video card. It's not that old. I'm playing at 1080p, and the frame rate cap is at 30 FPS, but of course the game has not been able to keep up at 30 for a fair amount of sections. And it doesn't seem like that much is going on in many of these parts that would justify that, right? I don't know. Maybe I'm just a little bit spoiled after playing the Resident Evil games that came out over the past few years that look fantastic and run great. And I know Bloober Team is not, like, they're a much smaller team than Capcom, but still, so I don't see why the game runs as poorly as it does. Not sure if I have any other thoughts about it. Maybe not, because there's really there's not that much to talk about, honestly. You go to a hotel, you discover that people were killed here, you find Sadness, and you discover that you have to save her. Well, Marianne wants to save her. And then Marianne discovers, oh, this is actually well, she discovers later on that this is part of her past as well. So Sadness, I guess Sadness was the Dead World version of Lily. Like, we figured that Lily was dead, but no, Lily was actually alive and an adult. But Sadness was also Lily. So Sadness was the Dead World version, because each character, each medium has their own different variation of that power. In Marianne's case, her Dead World version looks exactly like her, but with white hair and like different colored eyes and a fungus arm. With Thomas, his Dead World version is a separate person, and it still looks like Thomas, but like covered with fungus. And I guess with Lily, I guess her Dead World version was a little girl, the little girl version of herself. But Sadness was wearing a death mask. Like, the game establishes that dead people wear those porcelain masks. Like, that's how you identify someone as being dead. But Sadness was wearing a death mask. Why would that? That seems like a lie, right? That seems like a swerve, like maybe being a little dishonest there about Sadness's nature. That we're made to think that she's a ghost because she's wearing a death mask, but she's not dead. Well, maybe that's not so important, but it's just something I'm thinking about now. Why was Sadness wearing a mask if she wasn't dead? That was just to make us think she was dead, but she wasn't. Well, maybe there's nothing else for me to say really about the medium. It was a boring game to play, and I've played some boring games. Look, I enjoy some slow-paced, methodical, fairly dull games. I can get into it. I just feel like this game was never really all that compelling. I played it because it's a new horror game. I like horror. And like a lot of people were looking forward to this. Screenshots and videos looked interesting. But I just didn't find this to be interesting or compelling. As we went on, it just never happened. It never really picked up. Like at some points it seemed like it might pick up, like when the mall was first introduced, and it never got there. Like there are some fundamental story and pacing issues, I think. At the end of this is another, just a completely unrelated game, but at the end of Final Fantasy Legend 2, I kind of gush about it, about how I think even though the game is so simple and the dialogue is so simple and childlike, I think the story is still good because it's a very logical progression of story beats that are arranged in a good way. And I think this game's the complete opposite of that. It's very... Like, the graphics are impressive. It's clearly a high-budget game, or high budget for Bloober Team's level. And they're clearly trying to have a deep, emotional, adult story. And just, like, the basic progression of story beats is just not... It's not there. It's not good storytelling on a basic level. And they just kind of put all this more good-looking, more polished stuff on top of that fundamentally flawed story. Is just how I guess that's the impression I feel about it. Like there's clearly some polish in this game, but there's no foundation to it. Oh, I guess if we're finishing the medium here, I guess there is one more thing to talk about. At the beginning, I said the bar I was holding it to is this game better than the bottom of the barrel stuff that I've played? And I named Nightcry, Remothered, and Crying Is Not Enough as the absolute bottom of the barrel. Is this better than that? Than those games? Did it pass that bar? And this was a much tighter, closer question than I thought it was. I thought it was going to clearly pass that bar, and I have to give more thought to that than I expected I was going to. I'm gonna say it barely passes that bar. Why? Those 3 games I mentioned are very frustrating to play. Not necessarily to watch, but to play. The medium, you get through it pretty smoothly. Like, there were some bits that I had to try over again, but overall, it's not a game that really puts up that much of a fight as you go through it. It doesn't it doesn't give you too much of a challenge. So at least it didn't get too frustrating to actually play, as opposed to those other games that I mentioned. So I guess it actually does pass that very bottom of the barrel bar. Now, you might say this wasn't as interesting to watch, that watching something like Nightcry was hilarious. Yes, but those games were not deliberately funny. They're not meant to be funny. The fact that they were funny was completely unintentional, so I cannot give them credit for that. The medium is not funny or really all that interesting to watch, but at the very least, it wasn't as frustrating to play, so I guess it passes that bar. The second bar that I mentioned was, is it better than the Dark Pictures games, Man of Medan and Little Hope? And no. As much as I poke fun and mock the Dark Pictures games, those are absolutely better than this. I hated the ending to Little Hope and thought that game had a lot of problems. That game is better than this. It's not particularly close either. The third comparison I made, I asked, will this game be better than Silent Hill Homecoming? Silent Hill Homecoming is such hot trash, but it's better than this. I have to give it credit. Homecoming was a better game than this. I don't like saying that either. Homecoming is bad, but this is definitely worse. So, the medium does pass the absolute bottom of the barrel bar, but it does not pass any of those other bars. I'll say that. I'll say that much. And with that, I don't think there's anything else about the medium I have to say. So, that's it. That's our playthrough of the medium, the latest game. Game in quotes, and let's put that in quotes. I'll say the latest horror game. Horror is in quotes, game is in quotes. From Bloober Team. That's been it. That's been the mediocreum, huh? Yeah? Wordplay there? Yeah.